Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Kvitova captures her maiden Miami crown.
Medvedev wins his fourth title of the year.
And Wimbledon lifts ban on Russians and Belarusians.
Kim, Chris, today is the 3rd of April and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. The Miami Open has come to a close and we have two champions, Daniil Medvedev and Petra Kvitova. Novak Djokovic is back to world number one. He wasn't even there in the Sunshine Double and he's gone back up the rankings to the top spot. I mean, guys, I'm not going to lie. I feel a little disappointed that last week we were talking about the Sunshine Double and dare I say, it looked on the cards that we were going to get repeat champions for the first time in a very long time. But sadly, it has not happened.
We definitely hyped that up too much, didn't we? It was not to be. And it wasn't the sunniest of weeks either, was it? Quite a bit of rain.
I mean, Sunshine Double, particularly this year, I think, has been very, very questionable given
Sunshine
the amount of rain.
Single, could we have?
The sunshine and water rain double? No, that's a bit rubbish. But yeah, I feel like Miami this year was affected by rain way more than I've ever has experienced, as just watching it on TV and seeing so many delays occur.
Well, that means they don't have a roof, so they're pretty stuck when it does rain. I mean, it's just an interesting setup, like where the tournament is. They have to build like a stadium within a stadium, so it's quite a unique sort of entity in itself. But I mean, we had some great tennis regardless. Once players could get onto court, which we'll get onto, in just a moment. But there's been some amusing things flying around in the tennis world, aside from kind of on court, hasn't there, Joel? You were sending both me and Chris a lot of storylines over the weekend, getting really excited, and then you realised not long after that a lot of them were April Fools.
Yeah.
Do you feel a bit
Hang on, you were getting me
confused?
You were getting me confused with Chris. Chris was the one.
I don't know what you mean.
Who was getting fully duped by fake tennis headlines on
They're just
April
so
1st.
Believable, Joel. The Muguruza retiring one, I thought this makes sense. And then after that, she basically put something out saying that she's not going to be back until, the US Open and the hard court swing then. And she's had some pretty bad results over there. So I think maybe that wasn't an April Fool after all. It was a foreshadowing.
It's as good a retirement as any, yeah. What ones have we had this year then, guys? If our listeners haven't been privy to them.
Oh, Serena come back. I actually almost sent that to someone.
Oh, that is, yeah, you can see that happening, can't you?
Well, the one I really enjoyed was from the US Open. I clocked this one on Instagram. They came out with breaking news. Players will be permitted to use artificially intelligent coaching at the 2023 US Open. So I was already, excited. I was envisaging, Nick Kyrgios on court, and in his corner was a screen, and it was like ChatGPT. It was like you could ask some questions into ChatGPT, and he was going to get some answers, and then he was going to go on and win the tournament. I was sort of envisaging maybe that could happen.
I mean, that seems a little bit more like what Patrick Mortoglu gets up to at his academy, where they seem to give you all of those updates. In COVID they had that, but
I could see that happen.
I think eventually.
I'm curious to know, like a player asking some questions that they would ask a coach to ChatGPT to see what the answers
could be
are.
next gen finals. We could see that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Any
like
April
I
Fools
agree.
by any sort of tennis outlet could just be an innovation or a trial.
Well, I'm going to be a lot more
finals.
ready for next year, because I also saw that ITF said that the new rules say you have to hit at least one underarm serve per match.
Oh,
And that was when I knew. That's when I knew it was April 1st. But before that, I believed everything.
no, I could believe that at next gen finals, but yeah, that's quite that was quite an interesting one. I mean, listeners, let us know if there are any April Fools that you saw in the tennis world that you believed, even just for a split second. Let us know, because I'm saying now, Chris was 100%
led down the garden path
by Muguruza.
I got it all wrong. I should have put something up on our socials, shouldn't I? I should have on Tennis Month, Tennis Yearly. We should have been renamed. One podcast once a year.
It's got me thinking, if we did produce one podcast a year, what would we put in it? And would it be like 15 hours
It would
long?
be a quiz. It would be a quiz, surely.
Just one quiz.
We should have done one.
Next year.
Oh, well, my highlight of the week is slightly less fun, shall we say? Although I think it's going to be an interesting watch. And that is, there's been news that there's a new documentary out on the scene. It's about Boris Becker. It's about his rise and fall. We've had news of this released, I think, just today, actually. So Oscar-winning director Alex Gibney is charting the sort of history of Boris Becker, which we all know ended in disarray kind of quite recently with him being sent off to prison for tax fraud and financial, malpractice. But Alex Gibney, for anyone who has previously seen some of his documentaries, he's done quite a few. He's did The Armstrong Lie, which is about Lance Armstrong. I found that pretty fascinating when I saw that about 10 years ago. So I'm down for this. I think a good kind of scandalous behind the scenes documentary. I think it'd be a great watch. So I'm looking forward to this. It's coming out later this week on Apple TV. So I just need to find someone who's got an Apple TV so I can actually watch it.
Don't worry, Kim. Got you covered.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a good watch. It's called Boom Boom, The World versus Boris Becker.
Boom. Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot to pack into that, Kim. He certainly got an entertaining story from cupboards in Nobu, prison, running out of money.
All sorts.
Goodness.
And is it going to be a better watch than Roger Federer going around Switzerland on a train?
Well, Chris is here to tell us.
I'm also here to correct the what I spoke about last week. I think it was made out to feel like it was a bit of an epic, but I think that was a ploy by the tourist board, of Switzerland. It was actually 3 minutes and 46 seconds.
Oh, what?
Oh no, what a letdown.
And I think that the real thing I should have realised is that the director's actually retired from filmmaking, the director of Cats.
Did he retire because of Cats?
I do think that is the case, and that's why he's doing adverts now. So I should have known this couldn't be that long. It wasn't going to be feature length. But
it all makes sense now.
For anyone who watched it, it's very entertaining. I won't ruin the whole plot for you, but let's just say that Roger Federer and Trevor Noah were not very good at boarding a train, and then hilarity ensues. So it was very, very entertaining, very short. And I'm hoping there'll be a part 2. But the hashtag I need Switzerland is something that I think everyone should use because, I mean, of all hashtags, that is quite funny. I need Switzerland. It doesn't quite seem to make sense to me.
It's a sequel, them getting off a train then, if the first one's about them getting on a train.
I think every time it's just going to be them getting on a different train in Switzerland. So I think they were about to board the next one. But
sounds like the hashtag should have been I need a train ticket or something more than
they actually didn't have a train
Switzerland.
ticket. I mean, it's like you've already seen it. And some elderly lady had to...
Oh, sorry, spoiler alert, listeners.
Spoiler alert for anyone who didn't make it through the 3 minutes and 46 seconds. They did not purchase a ticket. Someone purchased it for them. But very enjoyable nonetheless.
At least their trains aren't on strike out in Switzerland, it would
great
seem. Well, on to the tennis, because we have had some tennis in Miami, despite the rain. And we have had, new champions. Indian Wells champions were not able to do the Sunshine Double. We've had Petra Kvitova and Daniil Medvedev winning the titles out in Miami. Let's start with the women first, because Petra Kvitova is the champion. She ended Elena Rybakina's 13-match win streak. And this is now Kvitova's 9th WTA 1000 level title, her 30th title overall in her career. And she's now back in the top 10 of the rankings. So a really, really positive last fortnight for Petra Kvitova. Straight sets in the final. It was 7-6, 6-2. They had a bit of a battle in that first set in the tie-break. But Kvitova kind of, comfortable in that second set, kind of resting on that tiebreak, really. Kvitova had to say 5 set points and then sort of never really looked back. Chris, did this surprise you, how well Kvitova was playing and how she was able to, put Rybakina away, who obviously has been in amazing form of late?
I have to say, it is surprising. I think everyone was pretty pleased that, that she was able to to do this because she is so popular on the tour and such a popular champion. I did not predict this. I don't think anyone did, and it sounds like Kvitova didn't by the interview she did on court afterwards when Daniela Henchikova asked her, when we had that coffee earlier in the week, I don't think either of us thought this would happen. And she goes, no, I had no idea. It came out of nowhere. So she's as confused as everyone else is. But I think the thing that really stood out from this match for me is that she probably shouldn't have edged that first set. And I think that was the real key here. Looking at some of the numbers and what, again, is kind of a running theme is that despite the ace count for Rybakina, that first serve percentage needs to come up. She never really gets over 60%. This was 57%. It was a little bit lower in the second set as well. Obviously, she wins a lot of points behind it. Whereas kind of on the other side of things, Kvitova served probably the best I've seen her serve in years. I mean, it was almost 80% of first serve, 76% first serves in, and 79% of first serves won, and 75% of second serves. So I think a lot of talk was about the fact that Kvitova does have one of the best second serves on tour. And I think she just showed exactly why, she's so dangerous, because she does have some really big weapons. And every now and again, when she's kind of on top form, she does this sort of thing. And it's kind of pretty spectacular to watch.
And she's a lefty as well. I think, Rybakina, was struggled, I think, to kind of deal with that unique proposition,
On the second serve, maybe especially.
Exactly. And, Chris, as you said, I think the second serve was a real big difference looking at the numbers. 75% second serve points won by Kvitova is outstanding by anyone's measurements. But for me, it's amazing, I think, to see this. I'm surprised, I feel like, as everyone else. But at the same time, I don't feel like I should be, because, we know her prowess on the tour. I think there have been questions maybe of, has she almost become part of like the old guard? I've put her in that generation of kind of, the Victoria Azarenkas, and this tournament very much was focused on that new guard in terms of, who's going to win this? Is it Rybakina? Is it Sabalenka? Is it going to be someone else? But to see it come from someone like Petra, who's such I feel like a universally appreciated player who has had her ups and downs in the past, but is such a quality player that when she is able to bring that consistency and put it together across 2 weeks, especially on this court surface, which played into her game and her her big serving capabilities. Yeah, still, regardless of this new generation coming in, no one was able to stop her.
Yeah, it was a super quick court, and I think that definitely showed in terms of, we'll talk about Medvedev later on, but he really liked the speed the ball was going through the court in comparison to Indian Wells. So obviously a very different surface. One question I was going to ask you both is something that Kvitova has always spoken about, is that she doesn't actually practice that much. And it seems to be the reason for she cites it as the reason for the longevity of her career. And she actually said after this one, maybe I'll just not ever practice and just play matches, because she seems to be able to kind of bring it despite not always practicing or kind of giving herself these days off. And it feels like maybe a lot of players have gone a little bit too far in terms of how much they're practicing and kind of burning a bit too much energy. Whereas Kvitova is almost kind of from the days of Fred Perry, where you have a nice coffee in the club and then off you go and pick up a racket and see how it goes on the day. But I think there's something really interesting about the fact that's such a stark contrast to how every other player is communicating about how they practice and how they train.
Yeah, I think it's a more sustainable approach, and it's more likely to lead to greater longevity, because you're not burning yourself out. You're just doing, I guess, what feels right for you and your body. As long as you maintain a high level of fitness somehow, but does that have to be necessarily churning out hours on the practice court? There are other ways of getting that in. So I think that's a really healthy attitude. She's 33 years old now, but this is the 13th time she's played this tournament, and she's finally won it, and she's the oldest champion here since Serena, who won it back in 2015. So I think her approach seems to be paying off, given the result we've had here.
I think, with Kvitova, she's had so many big moments, I think, in her career. She's got so much experience to draw upon that I definitely think it compensates for, just grinding away. I don't think, I agree. I don't think it necessarily is the right approach for everyone. You talk about Chris Holger Rune.
I was thinking about him exactly with this.
He lives and breathes tennis like, 24/7. And it just shows that there's not just one way, I think, to, reach the top of your game. You've got to figure it out yourself. And I think for players like Kvitova, I probably, again, put Azarenka in that category as well, that they take a more laid back and chilled approach.
She would train a lot, I'd imagine.
Oh, do you think?
I think she's always been known as being a super hard worker on the court. But then I think for example, like maybe, someone like Emma Raducanu should do more of the conditioning, less of the hitting, because of the fact that there are some difficulties there.
Keep it in the gym.
I mean, it must be quite funny. This is one quote that I'll say that I think is quite funny, because she says that she says, I think it's tough for coaches that they can't really put the work in with me on the court. And I just think it must be so funny. She's like, no, not today. But it definitely allows her to keep her passion, is what she said. And her passion is playing tennis and competing. So I think passion is something that is underrated when it comes to the sport, because I think it's so easy to lose it. I think Stefanos Tsitsipas was an example of that last year. He was playing so often and training so much that you can see almost the life had been drained out of him a little bit.
I mean, if you were a coach, would that frustrate you? Kvitova's mentality of, actually, I want to spend as little hours on the practice courts as possible. Yes, I'll do my work in the gym and keep my conditioning up. But if you were a coach, would that frustrate you, that mentality and that approach?
That's a tricky one.
Depends how much you're getting paid. If you're getting paid the same amount and you're actually having to turn up less, have a few more days off, I think I'd prefer to work with Petra Kvitova myself.
Yeah, you could enjoy her on her days off, and
you'd have a coffee with her.
Yeah, I think you'd have to figure out, though, wouldn't you? Because if her trajectory is going to be winning a few tournaments every year, having incredible results, rather than 3 tournaments in 3 weeks. So I think you're working for different goals, aren't you? So you've got to get the right coach, and clearly she has in her coach, who's also her fiance.
I mean, just on that, does this change your kind of approach for Kvitova and your kind of levels of expectation from her for the rest of the year? I think I heard her in interview say she's now got like no expectations, moving forward. And we're coming up to the clay swing, which I would have said is not as ideal for her as maybe like the grass court season, beyond that. But with this result, do you think it's like, yeah, I knew she could do it and she's done it? Or do you think she can kick on for him here and go, even higher than just, getting into the top 10, maybe even top 5?
I think she could do it. She's been there before. Certainly for Wimbledon, she's always a contender, having won it twice before. And, she hasn't won it for 10 years, but you've got to always include her in the conversation. So I'm not so sure about the clay, but certainly when it comes to the grass, if she's still in reasonable form and is obviously fit and healthy, I would definitely be including her in possibly top 5 candidates for the title, given her form there.
Yeah, and she has won Madrid 3 times, the only player to win Madrid 3 times.
That's true. Yeah.
So there could be a result on clay. She's reached semi-finals with the French, was her last semi-final. That was in the October year. But again, it's just, who knows where she's going to peak next, I think is what she's kind of saying, right?
It doesn't sound like she knows.
I think that's healthy, though. I think having less expectation is on yourself, it's the way to go, to be more relaxed. And she was able to put up with anything that Elena Rybakina threw at her, including that epic tiebreak. I think Kvitova said it was the longest tiebreak she's ever played. So 16-14. And funnily enough, in the women's doubles final, they actually had exactly the same score, not in the tiebreak, but in the match. It was a 7-6, 6-2 win. That was for Coco Gauff and Jessie Pegula. So they won, beating Taylor Townsend and Leylah Fernandez. But interesting chat actually after the doubles final with Gauff and Pegula. They were talking about trash talking on the women's tour and also the men's tour, but more so the women's tour, and how it isn't really a thing in tennis. But they were both kind of up for it being a thing. Can you see it becoming a thing? Do you think this is what we want in tennis? It definitely isn't the same atmosphere as like basketball and other kind of sports. So I'm not sure about it myself, but Joel, I feel like this would be kind of up your street. I feel like you'd love to see a bit more banter.
Absolutely. The more trash talk the better. I think it'll get more and more people engaged. I think we're entering this new era of like content in relation to tennis. We've seen with like the Breakpoint Netflix series, and I do genuinely think, as you either love it or hate it, but you've seen, in relation to kind of like Nick Kyrgios and how he gets people interested in tennis from outside of the tennis sphere. Again, I think trash talk is probably another mechanism or another way that, if I think done and delivered in the right way, again, I think it can bring new levels, I think, to rivalries and competitions that, potentially haven't really been surfaced as much on the women's tour in the past. I will say I feel like you see it more in team events, and I've really enjoyed that sort of friendly banter rivalry. You see it, like, for example, United Cup, when they're all on the bench together, and I like it in those environments, and I think you see it more there. But on an individual level, I certainly think it has a space, but it does, I think, need to be handled delicately, in the sense that I don't want it to become like sledging in cricket, where it feels like too personal, or an attack on someone that is going to be is like almost overly critical.
That's what Pegula said, actually, Joel. She said that the girls tend to kind of get a little bit too personal with it, which doesn't know why, because it's kind of that whole spirit of the college basketball side of stuff that she's talking about, and that Coco's a really big fan of as well. And they're always kind of having kind of comments with each other, and they're doing it like in good fun. But Pegula said it's kind of like it all kind of rests on the handshake. That's what happens on the WTA tour. That they're here
I
for
think
the
they
handshake.
should mic up. They should properly mic up.
I think people would love
handshake
that
more. Like handshake mic or something. I guess one other thought I just had is, I know Coco Gauff and Jessie Pegula are talking, I feel like, about everyone knows women's basketball and trash talk in that, but there's probably a bit of cultural barriers there as well. Like, what someone thinks is trash talk in America is probably completely different to what are the levels of acceptability, let's say, for example, in Australia, where you might have seen it in the cricket in terms of like sledging growing up. So it might be that I feel like would need to be overcome, or like, almost like some set of ground rules. Right, guys, this is what is trash talk.
I love a rule
this
book,
is not
Joel.
what is trash talk.
I'm happy to pull together the WTA trash talk handbook.
Oh yes, get a guidebook together.
I can't see a rule book being created for how much, like, is this offensive on a scale of 1 to 10?
On a
how
scale
much
of 1
will
to
allow,
doesn't have many tools.
Will allow 1 to 3. Yeah, exactly. I can't see that being a thing. But it was quite interesting to hear their perspective on it. But maybe they'll have to get their trash talking in some other way, maybe on the practice court. But Kvitova won't be involved with that, of course.
No, she'd know where to be found.
She can trash people over coffee. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you said trash talking happens more on the men's side. I'm not sure if there would be any trash talking in the Daniil Medvedev Jannik Sinner final. It was pretty standard. It was 7-5, 6-3 for Daniil Medvedev. So he's back to winning ways, his 4th title of the year, and his 5th final in as many tournaments, actually. So straight sets over Jannik Sinner. Sinner obviously got the better of Carlos Alcaraz in the semi-final, so he was able to get revenge over the Indian Wells defeat, but wasn't able to really challenge Daniil Medvedev too much in the final. I think he was probably a bit knackered after the Alcaraz match, which did make it a bit of a shame, and he wasn't feeling very well. So Joel, did you think it was quite disappointing final because of how Sinner was feeling, or do you think Medvedev was just going to be too strong anyway?
Yeah, I think if you look at their head-to-heads, I think regardless of if Sinner was fully fit or not, I think Medvedev was going to come through as the victor. I know that Sinner before, afterwards said he wasn't feeling 100%, but decided to give it a go anyway. I mean, it still feels like for Sinner this has been a fantastic week for him, avenging that loss to Carlos Alcaraz. I mean, that rivalry is just blossoming, and everyone is absolutely loving it. But yeah, for Medvedev, he, for me, is now, he's a hard court specialist, which I find a completely fascinating sort of position, because I feel like growing up, we never really spoke about hard court specialists. We talked about clay specialists, we might talk about grass court specialists, but I do genuinely feel that, all these tournaments that Medvedev wins, you look at the lack of tournaments he's won on other surfaces, to me, he is in this kind of category of hard court specialist that is going to make it very interesting, I think, now heading into the clay swing, because I think we know how good he is, and maybe it's only Novak Djokovic or even a Carlos Alcaraz that could defeat him on the hard. But I certainly think all the young pretenders, Jannik Sinner and everyone else, they still can't really deal with the octopus-like Medvedev from the back of the tennis court.
Yeah, he's now won 5 of the 6 hardcourt Masters 1000 events that we have, and he's got to the final in Indian Wells. So, he's almost done a clean sweep of all the hardcourt Masters. 4 titles already this year, which he did back in, I think, 2019 and 2021 as well. So he's kind of back up to those years where he's had really excellent results. But this final, he'd never lost to Sinner before, and he didn't really look like that was going to happen.
Would you agree that Medvedev is a hard court specialist, or do you just think he's a very good tennis player?
I think he's always been.
I think both.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think you could say he's not a very good tennis player when he's been world number 1, won a Grand Slam, beaten top players.
Not all
and had a lot
court,
of
though,
success.
isn't him, I'd say.
No,
Does it
it's
matter?
not naturally all court.
Does it matter that he is, at the moment, I think, being pigeonholed into a hard court specialist? I mean, there's a lot of hard court tournaments.
He can play on
throughout the
grass,
year.
I would say. I don't know. I feel like it's Kim and myself in defense of Medvedev, but I think he does well. He won Mallorca last year. There's no reason why his game wouldn't be great on grass. I think they obviously don't play too dissimilar. And you look at some of the tennis greats. I mean, someone like Pete Sampras, never a clay courter in the same sense that at the heights that he achieved, on some of the other surfaces. So he is definitely one of the best on hard courts, and he is his preferred surface. I think his return position lends itself most to that. I think his whole game is kind of built around being that sort of defensive player that turns around the points. I think something I saw from the stats this week was that his steal score, which is where you calculate how often a player wins the point from a defensive position, was at 55% for set 1. And bear in mind the tour average is 32%. And so I think it's kind of really clear that he's probably the best defensive player on hard court, I think, and one of the best counter punchers. And I think it'll be interesting to see if he does start to play a bit more front foot, a bit like Carlos Alcaraz. But no, I think obviously a great tennis player can play in any court, and who knows, maybe he'll pick up a few points on clay and bump himself even further at the rankings.
Yeah, he couldn't play clay last year, really, because he had that operation. So we didn't really see him have a clay season. So it will be really interesting if he can maintain his form. Daniil Medvedev. And then going on to Wimbledon, which he will now be able to play, which we'll get onto later on. Can you see him going back up to world number 1, given the fact that he will have points to gain that he wasn't, he didn't play last year. So he's got a lot of point potential coming up, hasn't he?
It's tough because Novak Djokovic is number 1, and if you also think about how little tennis he has been able to play, it's seriously, that is also very, very impressive in different respects. So I do think that's going to be very tough, but it does feel like Medvedev has an opportunity to, yes, I think at least make an attack on Novak Djokovic at the top. I think Novak Djokovic now is just obviously just going to try and play as many tournaments and make up for as much lost time as he can. But the fact that he's come out, I think, of the Sunshine Double as world number 1, it'll probably, motivate him to stay at the top where he should be.
Just to clarify, because Alcaraz lost to Sinner in the semi-finals, Novak Djokovic has gone back up to number 1 as of today. So they keep, it's backwards and forwards, isn't it, between the two of them. So despite not having played for weeks, Djokovic is back to world number 1. And actually, just talking about that Sinner-Alcaraz match, I mean, do you think that's the best you've ever seen Jannik Sinner play? The fact that he was able to avenge that defeat, and like you said, Joel, that rivalry just keeps building. I saw some absolutely insane points in the highlights, and just ridiculous play. It was a fantastic match, but obviously we need Sinner to now show that in finals and against Novak and the likes of him as well. Yeah,
I think if there's maybe one thing I would say is that there's still a work in progress with his body and being physical enough to. I appreciate that was a really strong test against Alcaraz, 3+ hours, but still being able to get up and go again. We saw with Daniil Medvedev, the number of matches he has played over the last few months and have just gone from tournament to tournament. He's probably almost feeling like a zombie getting into Miami. I didn't think he actually had much expectations in terms of winning, but he just got into a knack of it and he knew how to do it. And I think with Jannik Sinner, maybe I was a little bit disappointed he wasn't able to kick on, or that is an improvement that he could make. But yeah, that rivalry for me is blossoming and has been fantastic. They've had some great battles at Grand Slams, Wimbledon, US Open, and here it was again just fully on show how talented they are, and how well I think Darren Cahill has been working with Jannik Sinner and the benefits that he has brought to his game. I mean, you talk about all the amazing points they played. For me, that point at I think 4-2 in the first set, where Jannik Sinner hit a double-handed backhand cross-court with Alcaraz at the net to win. That for me is probably already going to be point of the year, given just the athleticism both those players showed and the heart they showed. And I think that was important in a stadium that massive, sellout crowd. Expectations were high, and they fully delivered on it.
Absolutely. And both Medvedev and Sinner, just going back to the final, they are the tour leading players. They've got the most wins on the tour so far this year. Novak Djokovic, of course, hasn't been able to play. He's still only lost one match, so he's got the fewest defeats of the year. Going into the clay court season, he's going to be a lot fresher than the likes of Medvedev and Sinner, who have been playing, week in, week out. So just before we move on to kind of the break, do you think that, obviously it's Novak Djokovic, doesn't really matter whether he's played a lot or little. Do you think that is going to have a factor? Do you think Medvedev is going to perhaps fatigue, or, he's peaked now? Will he be able to carry it through? Will Sinner be able to carry through this form onto the clay?
That is interesting though, Kim, because I think when it came to Djokovic rediscovering his form last year, he was playing quite a lot smaller tournaments, and I think not all of those tournaments was it kind of impeccable, kind of in the running. I think he obviously, the match that one of Joel's favourite matches that never finished, Medvedev Djokovic in Kazakhstan, in Astana, I think that was. And I think you have to play yourself into form a little bit more. I think the further you kind of get down into your career, I think match fitness is obviously a very real thing. When you're younger, I think you can sometimes bounce back a bit better, a bit like Carlos has, and maybe that was a bit more of a possibility there. So I think Djokovic needs to play some matches. I don't think he wants to go into the French, with the freshest legs. I think he wants to go in with an awful lot of confidence, because even if you are Novak Djokovic, I still think going in with a win streak and having picked up a Masters title on clay will really kind of cement his position and kind of really kind of make it clear that he is the one to beat still.
Yeah, well, we will see what he does. But let's take a very quick break now. We'll be back in the second half discussing Wimbledon lifting their ban on Russian and Belarusian players, the return of Elina Svitolina in Charleston, and also looking ahead to the rest of the action as the clay court swing very excitingly begins. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to Tennis Weekly, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. And we're going to move on to a par for the courts. Chris has got one for both myself and Joel. I don't think we're doing the years this week. Listeners would be pleased to know.
Yeah, a lot of criticism. I heard a lot of criticism about my instructions for last week's par for the courts. So
it felt like the end of year quiz, didn't it, Kim? It felt like
I might have to take that back to the drawing board.
It's a work in progress. We'll refine it as we go along.
It's a memory game. It's brain training for us all. Well, this one hopefully won't require any dates. It does require some locations. Ooh. We are looking at the ATP European Outdoor Clay Tournaments, and we're going to be doing a back and forth where you have to name. I will be very lenient here. You're able to give me the city or the title of the tournament. For some of them, there are 17 in total that are played on European outdoor clay.
Chris, before we get into this, I had a par for the courts up my sleeve that was also geographically based, but it wasn't what you have suggested. So I might keep that up my sleeve for next week.
Now, do we believe him, Kim, or do you think it's exactly what he suggested? He's going to get all the right answers.
It's just making me think of a time when Joel, I think, quoted the coordinates of an event in Kazakhstan on the podcast. And I was like, do you actually know that? Or are you just reading off something? And it was just quite amusing.
I'm not going to lie. I am a little bit
occasion.
worried because I definitely know that Kim's knowledge of geography is far stronger than mine.
Well, yeah, we know that. Is it Bad Homburg is not Hamburg? I remember that came up. There's some geographical conundrums at some point on the podcast, and that's one that's
you haven't given an answer away. Well, you have given one answer away, actually, but not two.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Would you like to kick us off then, Kim?
Okay, yes. So is this just any ATP tournament on the European clay that has existed in the past? And now?
Current ATP.
It's current, yes.
Currently.
Yes.
Oh, okay, right. Monte Carlo.
Madrid.
Barcelona.
Rome.
Munich.
Estoril.
Umag.
Oh,
Very
that's a good one. That's a very good one.
Now.
Yeah. Gstaad.
That's a correct answer.
Bastad.
I knew you were going to say that. I was so annoyed I said that because I knew that was an obvious one there. I'm trying to now think of all the Casper Ruud titles that he won.
The trio.
Yeah, there is one more, isn't there?
There is.
And I don't know it.
What country is it in?
I couldn't even tell you. Somewhere. Okay, what about Basel?
That's an incorrect answer, I'm afraid. You did actually already get the Swiss answer with Gstaad. You did do well. No one actually said the Hamburg Open, despite Kim.
I was about to say that, but I was saving it.
That was a very handy win for Kim there, because she did actually have one that she actually gave you earlier on, Joel, before we started.
I was also... Is Belgrade one still?
That is correct.
Because I was.
You would also have Belgrade.
Nice.
Yeah.
God, that was an annihilation when you look at it like that.
Yeah.
Shall I run you through some of the other ones you could have had?
Yes.
Well, this week, if you've been paying attention...
Marrakesh!
That's not in Europe, Joel.
That is correct. Estoril was already said. That's my bad. Munich was said. Barcelona was said. There's actually a tournament in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is a one that's might be a new one. That's an ATP 250. There's also Geneva. There's Lyon. And then when we head back after Wimbledon, there is Gstaad, Bastad. There's the Kitzbühel.
Kitzbühel,
which is the three. There's the Umag in Croatia, Hamburg, Bostad and Gstaad. So that was the lot.
Okay.
You did pretty well. I apologise to anyone in any of those cities that I've just said, because that was really not good.
Well, I just want to say that I would have won that if that included Golden Swing events in South America, 100%.
Well, it didn't. It was Europe.
I was
Joel.
robbed.
I actually won one. Yay. Hurrah. On that note, let's look at what's in our mailbag for the week. We've had Stephen get in contact with us via email. And he's asked, with the clay court season beginning, he's asked us, what is your favourite clay court tournament and why? And who do you think might unlock their clay court potential this year? So very interesting question. Thank you very much for getting in touch, Stephen. Chris, I'm going to come to you. Favourite clay tournament, and who do you think is going to be starring on the clay this season?
I have to go for Rome. I went there last year and I just think it is a fantastic tournament. I think it's got a great atmosphere. I think some of the courts are some of the best in the world. I think that it's really is just well done, and I think it's like low-key. It feels like a smaller version of a slam, so I think that would have to be my answer there. And then I've gone for, I think, Coco Gauff. Not necessarily that she didn't unlock it last year, but I do think that she's going to unlock her potential based on maybe not having the perfect start to the year. But she played so well in clay last year, and I think something great might be coming from her. And then as a backup, I put Qin Wen Zheng. I think, she's had some good results on clay. She hasn't quite had the result we were looking for this year. So maybe she might put it together. So I've gone for some players who've shown some form previously, but maybe they'll do one even better.
And Joel, what about you?
For me, I have gone Charleston as one of my favourite clay court tournaments, just because it's so unique. I always bang on the drum about different coloured clay events, and I really do enjoy the green clay events we do see crop up on the WTA tour, and I just think it has a very distinct feel about it that just marks it out from everywhere else. And I really kind of like that kind of. Also, it's got like kind of a family vibe to it, which I don't feel you get elsewhere. I like, Elina Svitolina, has chosen to come back at this event. So I'm a big Charleston fan.
Is she your pick for who might unlock their clay court potential?
Is it Elina Svitolina?
This week, she's up a break right now, Joel.
Oh, well.
Ooh.
It must be. No, it's not. It is actually a player we've already mentioned. It is Daniil Medvedev. I think, he's on a great run of form. He is now, I think, going to be seeded in like the top 4 seeds, for all the big events coming up. I think he's going to have that more protection than, he has ever, had previously when it has come to the clay court swing. And I just think there's just massive potential there. And I know that he gets frustrated by clay very, very easily and has lots of, quotes and things to say about it. But when you do look at his game and you look at the defensive aspects of his game, I just think that should work really, really well on a clay court, from the back of the baseline. So I'm going Daniil Medvedev to unlock his clay court.
So you think the
potential
very slow hard court of Indian Wells was a foreshadowing of what his clay court game could do?
Yes,
because that was not a hard court, if you ask him.
I genuinely think there's going to be. I think he's going to surprise himself with what he does on the clay this season.
What do you think, Kim?
Well, I mean, in terms of favourite tournament, for me, it's got to be Monte Carlo. It's by far the most beautiful setting, I think, with the mountains and the sea, and just the views are just stunning. So that will always be my favourite clay event. And if anyone has never, wants to go, just go. It's so good. I think for me, though, I think Krejcikova might do very well on the clay again. I know she's obviously unlocked her potential there before. But I think Rybakina, she's been in really good form. We haven't seen her sort of excel on clay before, but I feel like if she's going to do it, it's probably going to be this year. Given how well she's been playing, I think that can definitely transfer over. And then I think Jannik Sinner as well. Like, I think given his good form, I think he's going to have a decent clay season, and he's right up there really. And it's not that I don't think the likes of Alcaraz and Djokovic aren't going to excel, but perhaps he will finally go one step further on the clay.
He's sliding very well, even on hard court, Sinner. So maybe it will translate beautifully.
Yeah. So I could see him maybe picking up Monte Carlo actually.
And sorry, I just want to actually just say, when I say Daniil Medvedev's going to unlock his clay court potential, by that I mean I can definitely see him reaching like round 3 of Rome. I think that's a very realistic prospect.
Okay. Not going to be back in the quarterfinals again of the French Open.
Yeah.
He'll be able to reach round 3.
Come on, that was a very surprising run that we were not expecting when that happened.
I mean, I wasn't expecting. I don't think he was, but I mean, I'm surprised you haven't thought he would go even further. 2021, he reached the quarterfinal. 2022, a 4th round. Maybe he will make it one round further and go semi-final. Do you think, Joel?
Yeah. No, I would not be surprised.
I'm hoping this doesn't happen just because Joel's predicted it now.
I will wait with bated breath.
We'll also be able to see if he can do that at Wimbledon, because he'll be allowed to play this year. big news recently coming out is that Wimbledon have confirmed that Russian and Belarusian players will be allowed to play this summer. They've climbed down from the ban that they put in place last year. I think the threat of having sort of fines and sanctions again from the ATP and WTA tours, and the threat to the other British grass court events, the fact they might have gone elsewhere. I think Wimbledon have sort of said, we've been put in a bit of a difficult position. We're going to have to go back on our decision from last year and allow these players to play this year. I think what they're doing, though, is they are going to make these players sign neutrality declarations, which is in line with the UK government's guidance. And there'll also be a big, ban on flags and symbols and anything that can be deemed to be supportive of the war in Russia and Belarus. Joel, do you think this is the right decision? Do you think they were sort of pinned into a corner here and they didn't really have much of a choice with this one? Or do you think, there might have been decision makers in Wimbledon who thought actually, it didn't really work last year, didn't really have any effect?
Yeah, I think
it's fair to let them play.
I think this is a decision they probably didn't want to make, and they've almost sort of been pushed, I think, into this position by threats, from the ATP and WTA. I think there's been general kind of frustration in relation to last year, particularly with the ranking point situation. We talk about Rybakina, at the moment. I mean, she should have 2,000 points really added to her name. That I think, has just sort of shone a light on it just being, it just not feeling particularly kind of fair to players who did well in the event. So it's one of those where I think they're probably through gritted teeth they've had to make this statement. And again, it's very polarizing. We've already seen, I think, Rybakina and Kvitova, finalists in Miami, have very different opinions in relation to what has happened. Kvitova was very much like, I think the ban should have been in place, whereas Rybakina is obviously very happy that it's been relieved. So yeah, it's such a tricky one, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm sort of glad this has happened, because I think the ranking points for me is a big thing, and it kind of brings us back to kind of the competition. And if there are enough sort of, I think, guardrails and placeholders that are going to make sure that nothing controversial happens during the tournament, and I have no doubt Wimbledon will be very much on the beating heart of that, then I'm sort of, I think, all for this decision.
Chris, what do you think? Do you agree with what they've done?
I mean, I think we all saw this coming. There have been rumours about this for a while, and I think a big part of it has to be the fact that, last year with Rybakina winning, she's Moscow born and raised. She switched allegiances as a teenager for the funding because of how competitive it was in Russia to get funding. And that was in 2018. So not that long before all of this sort of kicked off. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But I mean, it didn't exactly make the point that Wimbledon were trying to make, because then obviously the propaganda side of things was that obviously Russia was able to claim that she was a Russian player because her family still live in Moscow. That's where her residence was, I believe at the time. So it just all made a bit of a nonsense of it. And I think there's something where I think that Wimbledon probably has fallen on the wrong side of trying to make an impact kind of beyond where it should be playing a role. And I think they did overstep the mark here, because I think discrimination is one thing, and I think discriminating based on nationality in this sense is kind of what it is, because it is an individual sport. There is your flag next to your name. But I think when it came down to this, it was not the result they wanted. It did not have the impact they wanted. And I think they have been kind of forced into the situation through the sanctions that they would have to allow players from Belarus and Russia to play. So it was all a bit of an exercise that backfired, I think. And I think the fact that it is changing this year just shows the lack of impact that happened last year.
I couldn't have put it better myself, Chris. I think I agree with all of the things you've just said and all the points raised. So I won't repeat. But yeah, I agree. I think this is the right move. whether they like it or not. Really, I never actually agreed with it in the first place.
In terms of how far it's gone, though, that was one question I did have. Maybe Kim, this is for you. In terms of you cannot be sponsored by a Russian company or organization either. So it goes a bit further than some, for example, tournaments have in terms of making sure that you don't have allegiances in terms of a funding or kind of any form of, I guess, kind of monetary benefit coming from Russia or being supported by the regime, so to speak. So that might be something that does have a bit of a nuance that might be interesting. Some players will find that slightly difficult. Kachanov has mentioned that. And maybe that is something where people will start to think a little bit more about, where they get their funding from and what that means for them ongoing.
That's a really great point. And yeah, if the players are being funded by the Russian Tennis Federation or have partnerships with Russian,
exactly,
then they may have to withdraw or break those partnerships. So they'll have to make that choice, won't they? So we may not see all the Russian and Belarusians back on the grass. We'll have to see about that one. Let's look at what we do have coming up this week. We've got 5 events this week. Headlined really by the WTA event out in Charleston, which is a 500 event out on the green clay. Svitolina has returned. She's on court actually as we speak against Yulia Putintseva. I think Svitolina is, like you said, a break-up, Chris. So a good return
we are back
so
on
far.
Serve. She's been broken back.
Kim.
We've jinxed
famous
it. We've
last
jinxed
words.
it.
Apologies. But yeah, we've also got in the draw on Jabeur and Jessie Pegula. They're the top 2 seeds. Belinda Bencic is there. Magda Goatnet, I think, is there. Azarenka Kasatkina.
It's a good draw.
It's a strong
very
field,
large
isn't
draw
it?
as well.
Well, the Americans don't do anything by halves, so we would hope for a big solid draw out in Charleston. I'll have to see how well Svitolina does. I wouldn't expect too much in her first match or tournament back, personally.
Do you know what? I have actually enjoyed seeing, before the main draw, obviously qualifying, Sabine Lisicki came through. I think she got a wild card into qualifying, actually, and then came through into the main draw and has got Dollarhide in the first round. I mean, I saw a couple of videos of her when she won the final qualifying round match, and she was obviously very emotional. It's amazing to see her. We know how injury ridden, unfortunately, her career has been at times, and to see her still have that motivation and drive, and to see her in a main draw, first round of a 500, it's, to me, that is an amazing feat in itself. Given that, the issues that she's had and plagued, unfortunately, I feel, over her career.
Yeah, no, that's really fantastic to see. I thought Dollarhide was French for some reason. Am I thinking of a different player?
100% thinking
maybe
of a different player.
We've seen her play for the US.
Dollarhide
We have in the doubles. Yeah, exactly.
Like late night doubles in Glasgow. With about 5 other people in attendance, yes.
There you go. Staying in the States, though, we've got the Houston event for the men, which is an ATP 250. So we've got, the top 4 seeds are all American. Francis Tiafoe, Tommy Paul, Brandon Nakashima and John Isner. So loads of Americans in the draw. Fernando Verdasco has a wild card. Another wild card.
He's picking up the wild cards Andy Murray doesn't need anymore.
Well, so's Jack Sock by the looks of things. But my money, I think, what about Christian Garin? He's been having some good form. I reckon he might come away with the title.
Well, it's as good as like a Golden Swing tournament, really, isn't it?
I mean, it might be a bit lower than a couple of them. A 125.
Coming across to, not quite Europe, but close enough. Marrakesh. We have an event in Marrakesh for the men as well, another 250. Lorenzo Musetti is the top seed with Dan Evans as the second seed. I have to see what Dan Evans can do on the clay. He's sort of been a bit quiet of late, I feel. But with that sort of draw, I think it's relatively open for him, to be quite honest. So I'd hope he would come through.
The French number 1 is playing, I see. Richard Gasquet.
Richard Gasquet, is he in Marrakesh?
He's also playing, but
not yet.
Seeded 6 and seeded 7.
And Hugo Gaston also is playing, and I didn't realise this. He won today, and his last win on the tour was in the clay swing last season. So
Clay mode activated for
clay
Gaston.
mode, exactly. Clay mode activated. I have enjoyed though, because we also have one out in Estoril, which is also going on at the moment. Ben Shelton from the United States has chosen to play that event over Houston. I'm not sure why that is, but I'm kind of curious because there's been a lot of hype about Ben Shelton, and I've seen him on hard courts of America, but I'm really curious to see how he gets on the clay, because he has not played a clay event as a pro. So I don't know if it's going to be like Bambi on ice, but I'm quite curious to see, given the hype, how he gets on, because I like to think, Chris, about Alicia Parks. Great on one particular surface. Yep. Yeah, I know. Indoor hard court. A little bit like Annette Kontaveit. Has not so far been able to do it anywhere else, unfortunately. So that's why I've got my eye a little bit on how Ben Shelton does this week.
It's a great story, but I think it might be his first time in Europe, and there's pictures of him on clay. Looks very happy. I think it might just be one big holiday. Let's see what he could do. Last time he was abroad, he did bloody well.
Well, the coastline around there is pretty nice, so I hope he enjoys himself. But yeah, it's going to be a tough tournament. He's got the likes of Hurkacz, Casper Ruud, Roberto Bautista Agut. I think he might well win the title, and Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. So yes, it's going to have something quite tough for Ben Shelton if he was to make his way through, with Bambi on ice or otherwise. Dominic Thiem is also in Estoril, so we'll see what he can do. And we do have actually another women's event, WTA, in Bogota, Colombia. It's a 250. Joel, you're not a fan of this draw, are you?
Kim, I'm the biggest fan of this. I'm the biggest fan of this draw. Yes.
Yeah. You were having a go at it earlier, saying it's a bit. Well, I don't want to use the B word, but
I know there have been some.
Are we allowed to use that word?
There are some naysayers who are saying this is maybe the worst WTA 250 draw of all time. So listeners, if you want to check a draw and
the history books
and see how budget, the B word, how budget you think it is, but I'm all for it, Kim, because I've just seen Francesca Jones, who got direct entry into the main draw, has just taken out Parisas Diaz in straight sets.
That's a great result.
Which is a great result, exactly.
Very good.
Yeah, particularly. I am not gonna lie, expecting a few funnier results in Bogota. You know, the altitude, the pressurized ball situation. It's a very unique setting, I feel, for an event. Exactly.
Eugenie Bouchard can get a win in her comeback match. That's just happened.
She's back. Yeah,
straight
she
sets
is back.
win.
Loads of new names I've not heard of in this draw, but SST is there, so I expect a few long matches featuring her as well. Would you like a bit of a long Serena Tormo match?
Sara Errani.
Oh, is she not retired?
Number 5 seed, Kim.
I thought she'd retired. Am I imagining things?
Maybe from the WTA tour, but
yeah.
Well, Kim, we now live in a time when Martina Trevisan is in the WTA top 20, so you're definitely not imagining things.
Harsh words, Joel.
Joel is really
I'm
not
Trevor
holding
Sand's
back
biggest
this
fan.
evening.
I'm Trevor Sand's biggest fan. Yes.
I was tempted to put Trevor Sand down for my player who's going to unlock potential on clay, but I mean, she kind of already has. But I
think
thought
she's
she might do it
maxed out.
again.
I agree. Yeah.
Well,
she's already peaked in Miami.
She's had a career high ranking, so that's factually accurate, Joel.
Well, very true, very true. But we shall see. We shall see. The clay court swing has begun. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come from the ATP and WTA tours.
We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
you can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Tennis Weekly Pod. You can email us on tennisweeklypod@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out our website at tennisweekly.co.uk.
And just before I finish, I must say again, the Sports Podcast Awards are coming up. The deadline is also coming up to nominate us for Best Tennis Podcast, April 6th. is the final day to get your votes in. We would really, really appreciate it at Tennis Weekly HQ if you could vote for us. The link is in the description, so just go to the description and click the link, and it'll take you through, and you can vote for us there. We would really, really appreciate it. We want to win. We're competitive people, and yes, please vote for us. And we will see you next Monday to wrap up all the action from the first week on the clay court swing of 2023 at Tennis Weekly HQ. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Kim.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.